Welcome to Amidon Planet. Good talk, real learning, better teaching. I'm Joel Amidon. Let's get started. Today on episode 143, we're continuing our work of exploring ideas and conversations that lead to real learning. That's right, real learning. Learned a lot today. And better teaching. I'm joined by Amy Jackson and Dr. Kristi Livingston, both from the University of Mississippi, whose work in morphology, or the study of the internal structure of words and how they are formed, you like that? Helps us think more deeply about an asset-based approach to literacy instruction. That's a mouthful. But basically, Amy and Kristi came to Amidon Planet to share some work that they had published in the Intervention in School and Clinic Journal that I thought was helpful in explaining some of the concepts and practices behind helping students learn to read. You know, I've had some kids learn to read, and I'm like, and even I learned. Guess what? I learned to read too. And thinking about like what is the terminology? What is like the foundation? What was happening, right? Like what are the building blocks there? And we really get into that. And also specifically too, thinking about the needs of students with identified learning needs. So, and we get in some definitions there. It's a real, like, I think there's a lot here for both the experienced practitioner, but even just the person that's like, what did it mean to learn to read? Or what does it mean for my kids? What are they going through? And also too, given what's happened in Mississippi with the, in quotes, the Mississippi Miracle, there's foundational research-based work that happened. And I think here that has been reinforced and applied to our teacher prep programs that you're going to hear about, right? And so I thought that was interesting as well. And also too, Amy and Kristi, they're two fun people to talk to. So I know you will enjoy this conversation. Before we dive in, if you enjoy Amidon Planet, the best way to support this work is to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It really helps others find these conversations. You can also share the podcast with a colleague, a friend, a stranger, whatever. You can also reach out with ideas or questions by sending me a note to joel@amidonplanet.com. We do have something for the mailbag today. I'm excited for that. You can also join my email list, the Amidon Planet Dispatch, for updates and ways to engage further. There are several buttons at amidonplanet.com where you can join the email list. We're trying to be better about being sustainable with that effort. That was actually the whole point of the first kind of relaunched edition of the Amidon Planet Dispatch, trying to be more conversational, more engagement, and just, offering, again, a way to keep this conversation going in just another medium. So if you're looking for that, you can go join that email list. And also too, just people are sharing. The listens are going up. So we're seeing like what is resonating with folks. What are the conversations that people are liking? And thank you for that. And so we'll keep trying to put out good content. If you keep sharing it, listening, again, appreciate everyone out there. All right, that's it. Let's get into this. Thanks for being part of this gathering. Now let's get into today's conversation with Amy Jackson and Dr. Kristi Livingston. Today, I'm joined by Amy Jackson and a returning guest to Amidon Planet, Dr. Kristi Livingston. Kristi, it is fantastic to have you back on Amidon Planet. I think this is the third time. Third?
Third time's a charm.
Third time's a charm. And I'm excited to bring Amy into this conversation as well, especially around the work that you all published and the questions around learning to read that you are both exploring. To get us started, I'd love to have each of you introduce yourself. Amy, why don't you kick us off and then we'll go with Kristi.
All right. Well, thank you for having me on Amidon Planet. I'm very excited to be here. So an introduction. I am Amy Jackson. I am originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I have been working with children with learning disabilities and dyslexia since 2004.
Whoa.
So I am a dyslexia therapist, Orton Gillingham certified tutor, and I am a PhD candidate at the University of Mississippi.
There you go. Fantastic. And Kristi, you want to give it a shot?
Absolutely. Dr. Amidon, thanks for having me back. Kristi Livingston. I am from the great state of Mississippi. I've been in education for about 17 years. Don't make me do the math, guys. And I am currently an assistant professor at the University of Mississippi. And I also have a really cool position in which I get to travel the country and work with teachers and students in states all across America, doing things around phonology, morphology, all the things we're going to be talking about today.
And we're going to put links to everything that we have here, and I'm going to take notes and everything. We also have a common thread amongst the three of us, a love of Disney.
Oh, uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah. There's actually an episode that Kristi and I still are threatening to do. There you go. There's the hearts. This is an audio podcast, but hearts just came fluttering out of the Zoom. But we still have to do that Disney. Like, what does Disney have to teach us about teaching? I read some books. Anyway.
Lessons from the Mouse. That's a book to talk about.
Lessons from the Mouse. That's right. That's right.
Add it to your list.
There we go. That's sneak preview, I guess, for the in the future. So we're here to talk about this article that you all published, Deconstructed, with pluses in there. I love that it's math. There's like addition symbols in between all those morphemes. Maybe.
Yeah.
Hey, there we go. A guide to explicit morphology intervention. I'm learning. So
Color us impressed today.
There you go. Well, and I think, I'm trying to make this, it's not just, hey, you all published something, let's celebrate it and come on. No. There's something to be learned here. And also, too, I'm a student here because I am like, sometimes with interacting with Amy around her dissertation topic and like I'm throwing out the words, but I'm just like using them. I'm not understanding them. So maybe I'm a perfect student for this sort of things. But this article, I think, has, and I'm just going to throw out some, has something to say for the person that's a novice, right? I know that there's things that a practitioner and a experienced practitioner are going to get out of it, but I learned some things out of this. So I'm excited to dive into this, excited to hear about the motivation for it. And just, again, we're all about learning how to teach better here, and I think this is helpful not only for the practitioner but also for the parent that's trying to figure out, hey, what's going on? What's going on with how to help my student learn how to read? What's going on in the interventionist space and whatever, So how can I learn a little bit more about what's going on here? So, all right, let's get into it. So, what problem? Well, I don't know. Let's start here. How did this come to be? How did this article even, emerge?
Well, I will tell you, I have, since I work with students who need direct instruction typically, and we emphasize direct instruction in phonics, when we're learning to read, learning to attach our letters with the sounds that those letters are representing. I typically do an explicit, which means direct, systematic phonics lesson plan approach with my students. So what that really means is that we are going at it in a procedural way. We are learning everything step by step. It's the same process every time. And every time we learn something new, we're doing those same procedures. And so that's part of it. I also, working with my students with dyslexia, I noticed that when I was teaching them morphemes, which is different than phonemes, so I'll just go ahead and tell you what that is. A phoneme is the smallest unit of sound in a word. So if you have the word dog, there are 3 phonemes in the word dog, 3 sounds. Dog. Okay. Morpheme is the smallest unit of meaning in a word. So dog has 1 morpheme because it's its smallest unit. It is you can't break the word dog down any further. And so I thought, why not use the same explicit lesson plan for introducing phonemes to introduce new morphemes to students. And that's where the idea of an explicit morphology intervention lesson plan came from.
Okay, real quick question then. So,
Yeah.
like the what you've introduced, this structure that you introduced in the article,
Yes.
you would already do with phonemes, but
Hmm.
which on just from an outsider, it would
Sure.
seem like morphemes might be. I'm not. I'm gonna say a word like easier because like there's meaning, right? There's meaning.
Right. And my actually my students with dyslexia remember morphemes better because there is meaning attached to that. And so they use it's like what Kristi says, it's their superpower. They use the meaning of the word to anchor the sound and the symbol.
And if I
So
have a meaning for dog, and I already
mhm.
have three, what we already said, right? Three phonemes there, and then I want to do hog,
Right.
still three. Now I
Still
just
three. Still
got it.
one morpheme.
Now all of a sudden I've got two different meanings, one more phoneme and another morpheme. Look at that. How's my vocab going?
Yep.
Kristi,
You just switch one phoneme to get a whole new word.
so Kristi, when you hear like this, like I mean, basically like saying, "Hey, this is what we did with phonemes. Now we can do this with morpheme." And you're like, "Yeah, yeah, we need to write this up." Is that kind of where we were?
Yeah, one of the things Amy and I talk about a lot is how, I don't know if you know this or your listeners know this, but teaching is really messy. And sometimes there's just a lot of noise around everything, around all the
Yeah.
strategies. And it's almost like your brain is so overwhelmed with this kid is not this kid is not reading on grade level yet. I don't know what to do. And if we could take away some guesswork and we could say, when we talk about being explicit and systematic, every day we are going to review previously taught morphemes before we start our lesson.
Mhm.
Every day we are going to build words this way. It frees the cognitive load of both teacher and student. The teacher goes into it after they've learned this routine. Even if I'm saying, okay, this week we're teaching SIST, SIST, which means to stand. So
Hmm.
re means back. So when I stand back, I am resisting something. It's easier for the students to latch on and connect to the new learning of the morpheme and not being so full of what does my teacher want me to do next? I don't understand what to do this worksheet, or I don't know what this procedure is. The procedures stay the same. The learning can be just on what's most important, which is the morphemes.
And tailored to where the student is at, right?
Right. Absolutely.
So, okay, one, I loved that in the article, like there was the building up of the terminology and things. So, like again, someone like me that's like, okay, what? I mean, I know we're throwing around these words. What do they actually mean? But I got it now. It's great. I'm throwing them around, in a podcast. There we go. But so when you're thinking about how are you helping? You're like, hey, we're providing structure, kind of like the kid that knows dog and now is an easy jump to hog. Hey, you already know this structure, maybe from teaching with the phonemes, but hey, now we can use it with the more like there's some
Morpheme.
like it's almost like the meaning that you've made with that structure. Now we can make meaning with that same structure, just doing it with a different level of reading, right?
Yeah,
Right.
like
And
I think
I
we want to
all I was
build
going to say is at a
teacher
very young age.
capacity.
I'm sorry, go ahead, you go.
No, I was going to say our goal is to build teacher capacity while we're building student knowledge. Like, and that one's not more important than the other. Like they both need to grow together.
And what were we gonna say, Amy?
I was just going to say, and they can learn morphemes at a very young age. Because if we think about taking the word dog, if I just add an S on the end, that makes the word dog plural. I've added an inflectional suffix, S, dogs. Now I know there's new meaning to that. There's more than one. So it can be pretty simple, a simple learning tool. And we can use words like suffix with
Yeah, well,
children.
that was the cool thing too, is like some of the tables that you have within the article, again, kind of helps someone like me that like I'm making, and obviously I know what a suffix is, you'd hope. But the different categories of free morphemes and bound morphemes, and how a free morpheme can exist on its own versus a bound morpheme needs to have some sort of connection with something else. And so like, hey, okay, all right, now we're starting to build a vocabulary of common sense making. And it reminds me, and Kristi, I'm pointing to you, when we were working with Claire Fern on her work, which she was on Abaddon Planet to talk about her dissertation research and like communicating like some of these, some of the stuff that they're doing with structured literacy. And we'll make a connection, or we'll put a link to in the show notes to that podcast, like communicating some of these principles to parents, because you want to get them on the same page. You want them to like, hey, let's all row in this boat together, versus like, well, no, they're just doing that at school, versus like, no, you know, hey, you can see what are these like smallest, what would you say, smallest
Unit
meaning?
of
Small. Say it again, Amy. Sorry.
smallest unit of meaning in a word.
Right. And so like, hey, we can figure out some smallest unit of meanings and now be reinforcing some things and maybe building on some things that they can then use within the classroom. So that's pretty cool.
Sometimes it's easier for parents to understand prefixes, suffixes, because it's something they learned. They have not necessarily learned about what sounds each letter makes. Some parents, like me, did not have phonics instruction. So that's not something that's typically known by parents.
So I guess real quick, just to, because we are using some language here, some things that people might hear, like the structured literacy, science of reading, and then phonic. How do those words fit together here?
Should I start? Okay. So the science of reading is a term that has recently come to the forefront of reading research. It is basically the body of research from many different fields that show or that demonstrate how a person or how a human learns to read. Okay, so from various fields, education, psychology, I'm trying to think, neuroscience, all these, several different fields. And then, so that's just the body of research that backs up the reasoning for structured literacy. So you cannot do the science of reading in your classroom. That's not, you cannot do that. You can use that research as the basis for your instructional approach. And then structured literacy is not only how we teach explicit systematic instruction, but also what we teach. And when humans are learning to read, we have to think about the different layers of language that they need to learn in order to read. And that is what structured literacy teaches us. So again, phonology, phonemes, orthography, which is the written system, right? Morphology, syntax. Syntax is the order of words and sentences. So think grammar. And then semantics, which is the vocabulary of words. And I think I missed one. Oh, and phonological awareness, which is the awareness of sounds and words. And so those pieces are all fitting together as important components and layers of language that need to be taught in order to learn to read. And so the science of reading backs that up. And then structured literacy is our approach.
And just to shine a light, like pre-service teachers are getting doses of this and having to pass the foundations of reading course to show some sort of competency in these sort of thing. I mean, I want to shine a light on the expertise that exists within our elementary school teachers on thinking, especially when like Claire, who was, I keep talking about her as like, I knew her as a Starbucks barista in town. And then, she was teaching my kids how to read, and it just like seeing the expertise that she's built up or Dr. Fern now, sorry, I shouldn't just refer to her as Claire, but seeing that, it's like, it's amazing what goes into it, but then how you're going about teaching it. And again, I think this article shines a light on that. I don't know, Kristi, if you had anything to add into that, because you're right in the thick of things of training our teachers.
Well, and I'll just say, like, oftentimes people will say, oh, well, structured literacy or science of reading, sometimes they'll try to use those interchangeably. They'll say it's just about phonics, to which we say no. Phonics is just an essential part of it. At least 60% of kids, at least, need very structured phonics and probably morphology interventions and instruction in order to become readers. And without it, they can't decode. But it's just one piece. The vocabulary, building background knowledge, teaching kids stuff, that is the other part. We're just not covering that. That's the next podcast topic. That's for another day.
Yeah. So, when you're putting this together and you're both in and you're thinking about putting together something to share and put out into the world, like how did you get stretched in like having those conversations, thinking about this idea and putting it in a place where it can be shared out and again, conversations with editors and whatever too. Like, so what challenged or stretched you in engaging in this work?
Well, when I first submitted the article, they came back with some revisions, and because I was in the middle of my doctoral work, I paused. I said, I can't do this right now. And then I decided to ask Dr. Livingston here for some help because I knew that she was an excellent trainer in practitioners. And I asked her to help me with making this more simplified and more clear for people to understand. And that's where she came in with her fabulous, what do you call them? Graphic comics
it's like our own
article.
Graphic novel.
Yeah.
It's like a mini graphic novel in there
within our article to help demonstrate how some of these procedures would work. And so we collaborated on making the article more clear. And that was a big challenge, I think, because I think sometimes I forget I've been living in this world for so long that I almost forget how to explain it so that other people can understand what I'm talking about instead of just up here in my brain. So that was a big challenge. What else did we have? Took us a while to write this article.
Well, I'm wondering for Kristi, from your side, from that on-ramp to coming in, like what challenge, but you can also share what you were just going to say too before I interrupt.
Well, no, I think even it's funny, we keep talking about like structure. I think when Amy came to me with this article originally, we had to sit down and say, what is the structure that we need to give this to pre-service teachers and in-service teachers that like connects to them exactly where they are? But something that Amy said to me that just has resonated within me is this concept that, because we wrote this for students with dyslexia or in the state that we live in, we know that students aren't able to get that ruling for dyslexia services in the school system. But we have a lot of students going around with characteristics of dyslexia, and they need to be taught in a very specific way. And this concept that morphology is a superpower, that we are taking an asset. Dyslexic students, when you tell them the sounds in dog are just that's not something that their brain does easily. So for some, it just happens. For students with dyslexia, the sounds, blending, segmenting, that's really tricky for them. But I can show them SIST, S-I-S-T, and say, this means to stand. Every time you see it, it has something to do with to stand. Most of our students with dyslexia have great vocabulary and background knowledge. It's taking the asset that they're already bringing to the table, pulling from that and saying, you can be a reader. We're going to help you get there. And I just thought like she really brought this in a very empowering way. And I thought, man, we got to have teachers feel like they can empower students with this same language and the same structure.
Because I would assume some would be like, the challenge would be like, no, start with the smallest thing. You have to start with the smallest thing, those sounds, right? And then we can go into the smallest unit of meaning, right? We have to go in that order versus you're saying, no. What is the student bringing to the table? Let's start there, asset-based perspective, and now we can use that in order to get to those pieces. Like
And
that's
we can do both at the same time too.
yeah.
You know, while they're simultaneously learning to decode, they can also learn morphemes. Um, I think also too a challenge that I was thinking about as you were talking is where to start, what to do. I think a lot of teachers know that this is good and helpful, but they don't know how to begin.
Mm.
And so that was a key piece to figuring out this article and how to get this structured for these teachers so they know
Well,
And
exactly.
I want to point out too that this was written through the lens of thinking about teachers working with older students. So if I have a student in a sixth grade classroom and they come to the word prevention, we don't want that student going like by the time they get to the end of the word, they've forgotten any of the sounds. We
yeah.
want them to look at prevention. Pre means before, shun means an action. Maybe they know the Latin then means to come. So this is going to stop something before it comes. It gives them a tool. It gives the teacher a tool and the student a tool to not try to sound out every single multisyllabic word in our language. It'd be great if we could do everything, but you're a sixth grader and you're sitting in a sixth grade classroom. We got to meet you where you are and do as much as we can for you in that moment.
Yeah, I'm
Those
like, oh,
multisyllabic words are tough.
yeah.
It
Well,
can be
and I think about like, same thing with, I guess maybe like place value or something like that, right? I'm seeing something and be like, I'm not having to be like, okay, that's one. Okay, I know that's, it's 5 million. I'm like, okay, all right, there's five. And then I got to think about plate. That plate. No. You want to say like, okay, where are the sets of three so I can see like, okay, we got millions, thousands, and then the tens, hundreds, and units. And so like those sorts of thinking of it as a bigger, again, dealing with the bigger pieces rather than, having to go to again, back to the smallest unit. Hey, real quick, what is dyslexia, Amy? Can you define it really succinctly? And I say that, and I'm jokingly saying that because
no.
I know that in our conversations, I know that that's more complicated than that. But just for folks that don't know, like
Right.
how would you even describe what dyslexia is?
Okay, well, the first thing I would do is refer them to the International Dyslexia Association website so that they can read the new and improved definition that has just come out in 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I used to have the original definition that came out in 2002 memorized, but they have since revised that definition. If I were to quote one of my favorite researchers, Dr. David Kilpatrick, he heavily wrote about phonemic proficiency. Um, he says that dyslexia is a difficulty learning to decode, read, and spell despite adequate instruction
Mm.
and effort and opportunity. So even though they might have had great instruction from a great teacher like Dr. Livingston, even though they might have worked very hard to try to learn to read, and they've had lots of opportunities to read, it's a persistent difficulty in learning to read and spell. And typically, students with dyslexia, their main challenge is that phonological processing, those
Mm.
processing of the sounds and attaching the sounds to the letters, or to the graphemes or orthography of the letters of our language. So it is not a visual disability, despite many misconceptions. It does not mean that we are looking at words and a person with dyslexia is looking at words and they're reading them backwards or seeing letters backwards. That's not it. It is a phonological processing difficulty. It is biological and it is linguistic. That is the short version of that answer, and probably not adequate enough. Oftentimes, I think that the other piece to this too is that we have to know that having dyslexia does not have anything to do with intelligence. So you can have a very intelligent human and they may still have dyslexia. It is just a difference in the way that their brain processes the sounds, and it leads to difficulty acquiring reading.
So having something like this systemic process in order to teach, and then dealing with an asset that they have of like is puts another tool in a teacher's tool belt on how to attack this problem.
Right.
Right.
And it really helps us when we are using this with everyone. It helps us see who is making that effort. We've got the good instruction. They've got opportunity. And despite all of those things, if they're still having difficulty, then we can help them get them the help that they need further than that.
I mean, I don't know, and this might date us versus Dr. Livingston, but I just remember it as this is what Theo Huxtable had, right? Like on the Cosby Show, like Theo Huxtable. It was, I mean, or then another show or something like, and I don't know if it was like putting on some tinted glasses would help somebody. Yeah, like, and so you're probably battling like, oh, I know, just like that, I know exactly what you're talking about. But the problem is too, what you have told me is that there's just not a test, right? Like when you said that definition, there's not just like, oh, they took the test, they got a 52, and that tells you that yes, they have dyslexia. Oh, 53, they don't. Like it's not like that. That's
right.
Well,
and it's just like you wouldn't want one test,
right,
to determine the trajectory of your entire academic career, right?
Exactly.
So, dyslexia is often identified in the ways that it can be identified through a series of tests that look at a pattern of strengths and weaknesses in terms of reading. So, like, for example, reading single words, real words, can be difficult. Reading single words that is in a timed test, in a timed fashion, is even more difficult because they have to recall what they're reading quickly. So anything that is typically timed, an oral reading fluency passage, timed tests are harder than just reading at your own pace. And then often even reading comprehension is better than reading a list of words. And then listening comprehension is better than reading comprehension. And so it's a pattern that you can see in the way that their scores reflect the difficulty of decoding. And so it's typically that, but it's a battery of tests that are used to determine dyslexia.
So it can be tough to get the category, to have that being identified, which means also a delay in services that might necessarily be needed for a student.
Right. And they also have to show difficulty in their academics. If they're keeping up with their peers, they may not be referred for MTSS and intervention.
Yeah.
So.
Multi-tiered systems of support.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So, okay, again, in putting something like this together and thinking about it in order to make it into something that's coherent for an article, also is a process of refining the ideas for yourself. So either, Kristi or you, like, in doing that, did that help you like make this idea better, right? I'm just assuming in that process, like what did the refinement look like in getting this done? Like what improvements did you make in thinking about this process, and that, and Amy trying to communicate it to Kristi and then trying to communicate it through the article?
I think we just kept going back to the article and trying to look at this in different lenses, like first as a quote unquote expert, and put in quotation marks for the listeners. And then also as practitioners, and then also we work with pre-service teachers every day. So we had to keep thinking, if you're starting out what does this look like? And then even for me, I get to work with a lot of schools. So this has refined my thinking and support. I'm working actually with a school right now in a neighboring state, and their curriculum has a morphology piece. It has a 15-minute morphology piece, but it's terrible. Like it's not systematic. It's like here's
Terrible.
some slides. Here are 8 morphemes to learn in one day, and then the morphemes don't connect to the kids' oral language at all. And I'm like, God, guess what? I know how to teach morphemes. So I've worked with the teachers, and we've taken what's in the curriculum and we've really revamped it and refined our own thinking as practitioners, like working with third grade students with how do we get them to mastery of this when the programs are still not teaching this in a systematic way.
Probably, I mean, giving those teachers agency, right? On how, like,
Yeah.
hey, I know what I'm supposed to get accomplished here. I can get it done. What about you, Amy?
What was the question?
In thinking, when having to communicate, like, has this process gotten, I mean, was there some refinement of the process, like in trying to communicate it through the article? Like, how did you get better at this by doing this work of engaging in writing this piece and communicating it with Kristi?
Well, I took a really challenging morphology class at the graduate level.
Yeah, you did.
I did, and I learned quite a bit in the linguistics department.
Yeah.
It was very worth my time. Um, but I will say that in refining what we were telling everyone, we had to think about the different types of advice we were giving,
Hmm.
right? So I think we were trying to define various um, I realms of knowledge. So we wanted to talk about why morphology, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the benefits of the morphology? So it can facilitate word recognition. It can facilitate spelling skills because all those morphemes are usually spelled the same way.
Yeah.
Mostly those prefixes and suffixes, they're always spelled the same way. So like if you're hopeless, we know less is Less, always spelled the same way, even though it may sound different. It can facilitate reading comprehension because of the meaning piece. And so we wanted to make sure that we talked about the benefits. We also talked about how to get started. And that was another realm of information. So assess your student and then determine the areas of need. Write the lesson plan and track those errors that the child makes while doing the lesson, and then reflect on the lesson and then start over. Um, and so we wanted to make sure that chunk of information was in there. And then the systematic plan was a step-by-step process. So we had that information. We also had a script for introducing a new morpheme that we had to put in. And so it was about deciding what information would be helpful and then what examples of those steps would be helpful.
Nice. So nothing's perfect, right? And the work is never done. So I guess what still feels incomplete? Like what's next, right? Like, in doing the, like, what would be the next step in this work? What still needs to be done?
Well, I think we've got to get it in the hands of teachers.
Okay.
I'd love to um, actually work with undergraduates in delivering an explicit morphology lesson plan, and sort of see where the understanding maybe um, maybe how they understand the lesson, how they understand morphemes, and figure out their understandings and misunderstandings, and to really dive into that. Um, but I think we do um, need more work with morphology. I think there's some researchers out there that are working with morphology, and then training the teachers on how to actually work with kids with us. I think that's our next step. What do you think, Kristi?
I mean, I just think even with our current positions as university instructors, like there's got to be, I'm not asking my juniors and seniors, obviously, to be experts at morphology when they leave me, but there has to be some knowledge base to understanding. I know we spend so much time in the phonology piece. We spend so much time teaching them how to teach phonics. There's got to be attention to, okay, you're working in third grade and up. Not saying you only can teach it there, but that's where we see a lot of students struggling with multisyllabic words. We have got to make sure that we are spending time deeply teaching them a routine that they can pick up no matter their program, where they feel empowered as teachers. Like, oh, I can teach this. I just need to do these 6 steps or how many ever steps it is. And then they can plug it wherever they need to.
Yeah, sometimes they're not given, like what you were saying, they're not given a great starting point, or a great lesson plan from their own curriculum, so they need to revise and go from there. And this, the key piece to this is, let's pretend you don't have a curriculum. What do you do? Right? And you can figure out what to do just from the article.
Well, and also too, I wonder, some people might be wondering, okay, well then, and I'm just curious if you would agree with this, I don't know if analogy or metaphor or whatever. It feels like this is like I'm going to the gym and I'm lifting weights. I'm building up muscles. And then, okay, well, once you have the muscles, you got to go out and use them, right? And like then putting, you know, appropriate books in front of kids that are stories that they like to read and getting them, like getting them fast. It's because it's like, it's like that dude that's always in the gym building up muscles and never, helping anyone move, like picking up a couch or anything like that, like if it's just for show, like, no, it's like, how do we go use those things? And I think you're saying that too, is like, this is building up those muscles so that they can go use them in reading and to like, to help, hey, let's also get that love of reading going on as well.
Well, also, what I like to always equate it to is the game of basketball. So what do you do in practice? You practice parts of what you're going to be needing to do, right? It is March Madness. So let's talk about basketball,
Yeah.
right? You have to dribble, you have to shoot, you have to pass, you have to run. Those
Yeah.
are all, and then when you put all those little pieces that you do into one thing, you're playing a game. And so it's the same thing when we're reading words and phonemes and morphemes and graphemes, we're putting it all together so that we can read. And I think you're right. It's one thing to practice, but it's another thing to play. And I think that's what we're doing. We're trying to help um, them actually put this into not into practice, into play.
That's good. It's pretty cool for a 7-page article, like all that's packed in it, you know?
Oh, it was packed.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. So where do we put this? We put this as a core text, we got some Amazon Planet things here. Occasional flyby, a seasonal return. Like, it feels like if you're teaching this for like your pre-service teachers or in-service teachers, like this could be a core text for them for like, what can you lean on as a structure for helping teach this stuff? I don't know, Kristi, you're nodding feverishly.
Well, we
Unless,
teach a course at the University of Mississippi about reading diagnosis and interventions to seniors who are working with students and trying to figure out what is the missing piece. And I think this is a perfect supplemental text to go along with what we're already doing. Here's your structure. It connects with what we've already been teaching about phonics. Like, this is how you can help a kid, like in a quick way.
nice. How about you, Amy?
I think absolutely we could use this as a supplemental text. I think that our teachers at the University of Mississippi are getting some really good instruction in reading, and this is just helpful for being able to think about morphology as not so challenging as they might think. They might have this preconceived notion as, oh gosh, I don't know how to teach that. But they've been already learning how to explicitly teach reading. So this is just another layer or level. And it's not as hard as they think it is,
Yeah, I like that.
at
Again,
least from this approach.
yeah, giving teachers agency, but then also too, what I like about this is like there's like the level of sophistication of what's going on in teaching kids to read, but then also too providing the agency like, but hey, here's a structure that you can do this hard stuff with, given your knowledge and preparation and like working with kids. Like it's like two sides of a coin, right? But I love what y'all did, and I'm so glad to be able to share that with folks that are able to listen. Anything else before we move on to my final two questions that have nothing to do with this article?
I don't think we mentioned it earlier, and I can't believe we haven't used this word today, Amy, but it's just going back to making sure people understand the English language is a morphophonemic language. I don't know, this is what we should have started the entire piece with.
Morphophonemic.
Yes.
Morphophonemic. We learn English is made of morphemes and it's made of phonemes. It is a morphophonemic language, and that is the basis by which this whole article came about. But we decided at the end to be like, here's a plug for the big word.
Well, I
It's a big
think based off of what we talked about at the initial, get go, like with the morphemes and phonemes, like, hey, people know what that means.
We're putting a word to it.
There you go.
Throw it
Morphophonemic.
around at parties. You'll look cool.
All right. So did want to ask two things. First, what's something you've been learning lately that's shaping your teaching? Nothing to do with this article. Maybe it is, but if you have something else, it'd be great. Because I know both of you are always thinking about how to get better about teaching, and that's the whole point of Avid on Planet.
I will say if you test it and the kids or the students, because our students are grown-ups, and they didn't get it, then you probably need to reflect because you didn't really teach it. And even 17 years in, if I assess it and my students didn't get it, that's on me, and I got to figure out how to actually teach it next time.
Yeah. I love that, that's it's a test of you as the teacher, the instructor, like
Sometimes I do not pass.
that's right. That's right. Amy, how about you?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about teaching um, and how to express my thoughts clearly. And there's this quote from Brene Brown. She says, "Clear is kind, unclear is unkind." And I feel like I'm constantly working to be as clear as I possibly can with my students. Um, and that doesn't always work, but I know how important it is to be clear because if my expectations are clear, then they know what is expected of them.
Hmm.
So I'm really working on uh, being as clear as I possibly can. Yeah.
Nice. Um, so, and I just told Amy this last Wednesday. Like, it's been cool because Andy Weir was on the podcast a little while ago, and he's getting a lot of publicity because of Project Hail Mary, and because he was the author of The Martian. But I would use in one of my classes one of the clips from The Martian where Matt Damon is trying to figure out how to communicate back to Earth from Mars, and like they're trying to work the problem. There's so much math happening in this problem, but it's all about making sense of problems and persevere in solving them. And like there's so many examples, and it doesn't have to be from movies, that kids are having, that how can we use those as motivations for learning versus like you just need to learn this, versus like I'm sure Kristi, you're working with teachers and they're like, man, I wish I had a structured way of teaching morphology or doing so teaching morphemes, and you're like, oh, I got something to teach you. And now that everyone's leaning in, right, because it's attacking a problem. And so just that problems not only are they're attractive sometimes, like they like you want to lean in and engage, in order to try to make a dent in them. So I don't know, just thinking about that with regards to how can I be more cognizant about using problems in my teaching. Second question, what's a piece of physical media that's been meaningful enough that you'd put it into somebody else's hands? As people know, just loving the physical, like books, records, movies. Like, what's something meaningful enough that you'd be like, you put it in somebody's hand and be like, take this, go listen to it, read it, watch it. You'll love it. What, I don't know. Anything come to mind?
I'll start.
Yes.
And actually, it's going to lead into
A gift
Chris.
for me? Thank you. Appreciate it.
I think.
No.
First of all, in terms of a morphology resource, I still recommend Unlocking Literacy by Dr. Marcia Henry. And I want to say I read this probably 10 years ago, probably 11 years ago. And it was still a really good, I would put that in people's hands. And then the other thing that's really been an important piece of reporting is the Hard Words podcast by Emily Hanford. This was a podcast that came out in 2018. I should maybe not say the date because I'm not sure. That talked about the reading, the world of reading and teaching reading, and how important it is to teach reading in the best way and most effective way possible. Kristi, you can maybe talk a little bit more about that.
But is there something fun, though, that you would put in somebody's hands?
Fun? What do you mean fun? Are you talking about what we're talking about today, or just something fun?
Just anything, like like I showed you like Ferris Bueller's, like something, anything.
I'm in the.
I know
I'll
you're in the
give you
middle
something.
of thinking about, dissertation and stuff, so that maybe there's
I
not a
am
lot
reading
of
a really
like,
good book right now.
okay, well, what is it?
Um,
Would you put it in
it,
somebody
it,
else's hands?
I would.
Okay, what is it? Is it,
It's Theo of Golden,
oh, okay.
and I think it's Alan.
Theo of Golden, we'll find it.
I'd have to go find the author.
We'll put
It's
a
like
link.
right on my. It's right
Yeah,
there,
we'll
but I won't get
we'll find it.
up.
Hey, there you go.
Theo Golden. It's a
But
beautiful
hey,
book about doing good deeds.
but we have some resources. But then, yeah, Theo of Golden, very good. Kristi, how about you? You always give
I'm
me
not
good
so much,
recommendations.
well, it's not so much putting it in someone's hands, but my graduate assistant and I had a long conversation about the Enneagram because I'm a little obsessed with it. And there's a whole playlist. It's like Atlas Enneagram Sleeping at Last, and there is a beautifully composed song about every Enneagram number, and it's just so fantastic. Don't laugh at me, Joel Amadon.
No, yeah,
It is such a good listen that I don't know. It's like one of the things that's like on repeat right now.
nice. I'll have to get the link to that. But you did come on and talk. What did we talk about? The road back to you? Didn't you come on and talk about the
Yes.
Enneagram?
I mean, I recently, like 2 weeks ago, did a whole Enneagram training with a bunch of principals and admins about how knowing yourself helps you better lead because you understand what you're bringing to the table and how you see the world.
Yes. Yep. My
Fascinating.
perfectionist. Yep. That's sometimes people don't want me to bring that to the
Are we a
table.
bunch of Enneagram ones on this podcast?
Yes.
Oh gosh. It's never going to be edited to make it out to the airway.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. All right. If people want to keep learning with you, where should they look? So, Kristi, I can put a link to your at
Yes.
University of Mississippi bio page. We'll put there.
I also
Amy,
have a TikTok called Get
Tick.
Lit with Livy. Lit like literacy, obviously. And then my Instagram is Get Lit with Livingston.
All right. We will put links to that as well. Amy, how about you?
Maybe talk to me in a year
I think
when
you
this
have a
dissertation will be done.
Mississippi one. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I Where could they find me? I don't know,
I think you have a
Mike.
University of Mississippi
I sure
page
do.
too.
You can email me anytime about
There you
any
go.
questions about working with children with dyslexia or morphology or, you know,
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending time on Amazon Planet. Thank you so much for putting this work out into the world, and we appreciate you.
Thanks for having us.
thank you.
All right, there's my conversation with Amy and Kristi. So thankful for their work, for putting it out into the world, and for helping us get a little bit more insight into that work, and for kind of honoring my questions, right, and just trying to understand further. Because again, this is a little bit outside my area of understanding, but that's for all of us, right? We're all learning. Okay. So now we're getting into the mailbag. This is the part of the show where the conversation keeps going. Dave from Michigan wrote in and pointed me to a TED Talk by George Land about the NASA creativity test. We'll put a link in the show notes to that TED Talk. What I love is not just the talk itself that Dave shared, but he also connected it to his own work in math or in his math courses and math ed courses. And Dave highlighted something that I think kind of echoes our conversation with Kristi and Amy, the idea that we can reclaim our creativity. So inside this TED Talk, there's, kind of some statistics about the creativity of kids and the creativity of adults and how it just gets slammed, and you could just be like, oh, creativity is being killed versus like, no. There's a message there about reclaiming it. And actually Dave is doing some of that reclaiming in his work, so like it brings us out this idea of hope, right? And speaking of hope, I think we're going to talk about Hope for Cynics, the book that's out there by Jamil Zaki in the near future, but just, stay tuned. So thanks, Dave, for sharing. Do you have a question, comment, or suggestion to submit to the mailbag? Shoot me an email to joel@amazonplanet.com. All right. One more thing. We're going to do the physical media of the episode, the part of the show where I share an album, a movie, or a book I've been listening to, watching, or reading. It's my small way of connecting with you. And if I'm being honest, it's probably my excuse to celebrate physical media, the kind that pulls you off the interwebs for a bit and helps you be just a little bit more present. We had some great recommendations by Kristi and Amy in the episode. Those will be in the show notes at amazonplanet.com/episode 143. And also, too, speaking of, we're just doing the mailbag, if you have suggestions for physical media, send them my way. I love a good recommendation. And I love going on the hunt for old movies and things that I should have watched or listened to or read, movies, books, albums, whatever. So if you have recommendations, go ahead. Hey, send them my way. I love good stuff. Okay. So for this one, for the physical media of this episode, we're talking about, this is the day after, I'm recording the day after May the 4th, right? May the 4th be with you. So we're going to talk Star Wars. And on May the 4th, I watched episode 3, Revenge of the Sith of the Star Wars prequels. Humble brag, I was able to find a set of Blu-rays of the prequel at a local thrift shop. Kind of excited about that. Now, there is a lot in the Revenge of the Sith movie, a lot of layers, right? Never mind the birth of Darth Vader, spoiler alert, never mind the epic battles, but I was more interested in the confusion generated by the Supreme Chancellor, aka Darth Sidious. Again, spoiler alert, probably should say that before, but movie's been out for 20 years, that's okay. So he created a lot of confusion, right? Through politics, war, fear. It sounded familiar. And that's all I'm going to say. I was like, ooh, huh. I did watch the rest of the prequel movies as well and was reminded about how excited I was in the second one, Attack of the Clones, right? When Yoda had his lightsaber battle with Count Dooku. Now, it was like I was transported back to, was I 20? Maybe I was 20. Like, again, like sitting in a theater and then seeing Yoda come in and like grabbing the lightsaber and you're like with your buddies and you're like, oh, is Yoda, is he? And then he starts flipping around and fighting with his lightsaber. And I just remember just the whole theater going bananas as Yoda is going bananas on the screen. And it was just like, I felt like I was transported back to that moment. So exciting. I mean, overall, a fairly forgettable movie. But that moment was not only worth the price of admission, it was worth my purchasing the set of prequels at the local thrift shop just a few days ago. And again, I will treasure and probably watch them again, maybe next May, right? All right. That's going to be it for today's conversation. Show notes are available at amazonplanet.com/episode 143. Thank you so much to Kristi and Amy, Dr. Kristi Livingston and Amy Jackson, for sharing their time and expertise and for putting their work out into the world. Thanks as always to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, again, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with a colleague. We appreciate everyone who does it. It helps more folks find these conversations. You can also reach out with ideas, questions, or opportunities by sending me a note to joel@amazonplanet.com, or those physical media recommendations, right? Or join the email list to stay connected and keep the conversation going. You can do that, all those little join the email list buttons at amazonplanet.com. Thanks again for spending time on Amazon Planet. Good talk, real learning, better teaching. Peace.